Hi, we're here with Mark Stamford of OccamSec. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into our subject for the day?
Sure. I have been doing cybersecurity in some fashion for 36 years now, which is quite depressing, actually. I started messing around with computers when I was a kid. I watched war games and thought this hacking stuff looked kind of fun. And it just kind of went from there. I joined a financial services firm when I was 22 doing cybersecurity work. I was then hired by KPMG to be a penetration tester. I worked for UBS, and then I founded my own company 11 years ago. So I've always played in that offensive security space. And obviously now, because I'm older and wiser, I spend all my time doing PowerPoints. So it's good.
I know the feeling. So let's talk about how government agencies can protect themselves from cyber attacks. We've had plenty of examples, unfortunately, here in the US of government agencies being vulnerable to cyber attacks, and a lot of people trying to do things to make them more secure. So in general, how high do you think the risk level is for a government agency in the United States? Like, how bad is their risk exposure really, in your view?
I think to use a good consulting term, it depends. I think that some agencies are obviously at much more heightened risk than others. So anyone in the defense area, anyone, I guess, dealing with the economy at large, so I would assume places like the IRS, they're more at risk than departments that may be dealing with things that we're less concerned about. Although given the way that cyber attacks seem to be sort of fanning out, I do think that there are less and less agencies which are kind of safe from attack right now. I mean, even things like agriculture is now a target, right, with the growth in supply chain attacks, things like that. There were reports just last week about hacking against the food system. Obviously, water supply is a big target right now. So I think that pretty much everything is a viable target. And then just as in the private sector, it really boils down to either who's the lowest hanging fruit, because that's where I'm going to go, or who has the thing that I really want, right? So those are going to be the two drivers of who's most at risk here.
So at a high level, what do you think government agencies should do to protect themselves better from cyber attacks?
Sure. I am somewhat, I guess, of a jaded skeptic on cybersecurity at this point. I think for a large part, the reality is that we keep doing the same stuff and it doesn't really work. And we know it doesn't work because we keep having breaches. And I think that government agencies suffer from the same, they suffer from the same problems as the private sector, right? There's a lack of resources, and the problem is so complex that really trying to get a handle around what do you do is just, it's a lot of work. I think there is a lot of kind of blocking and tackling type stuff that everyone can do. Apply patches, use strong passwords, use multi-factor authentication, do some kind of security awareness training around phishing and stuff like that. Although I'm not really a big advocate for that, but it does work. Do that sort of general housekeeping stuff that really isn't that complicated in theory. And that would at least raise the bar a bit. And then as the bar goes up, the attacker looks at your organization and says, no, I'm going to go look at someone else, right? And if we keep raising that bar incrementally, I think that's how we deal with this. But we do have to deal with the fact that there is a resource shortage. And it's a really complicated problem, right? I mean, even just saying do patch management correctly is really problematic when you think of the size of some of these government agencies. I mean, I think I read there are 7,000 water municipalities in the United States. And that's a lot of computers, right? That's a lot of industrial control systems, a lot of IoT, a lot of OT, a lot of desktops and servers. Just trying to work out the size of that environment and what you have to patch, that in of itself is a giant effort. So I think do the basics, But keep in mind that it is really complicated. So you are going to have to sort of start thinking, how do I maximize what I've got? How do I do more with less, to use a terrible cliche? I think that's what really has to happen.
So in terms of, I mean, one suggestion that's been made and in fact ordered, with the executive order 14028 is that government agencies should start to move to a zero trust model. What do you think of that recommendation?
I think it's a really good recommendation. I'm not sure how practical it is. I mean, zero trust is a really good security concept. It will certainly improve the security of those agencies, but how you do it in practice is more problematic, right? So if who am I trusting? Who am I not trusting? Okay, so I'm not trusting anyone. Okay, but then I've still got to figure out who to trust at some point, right? I mean, zero trust architecture isn't this kind of one size fits all thing you drop in and suddenly every machine is talking to every machine in its own sort of isolated island way. Also, when you think about a lot of these agencies have older technology. So, I mean, I did work for a state agency a while ago now, 15 years ago now, I think it was, but they were running MS-DOS 6.2 systems. So we're talking, I was doing that in 2007. MS-DOS 6.2 was around in 1990? And that was being used for key systems, right? And their answer as to why they had it was, well, it works, so why are we going to stop using it? So I think that the idea of using zero trust across the agencies is good. But I think that you've got to look at, there's this giant amount of legacy equipment, and how are we going to do that? How is that going to be in that architecture? It won't support a lot of the modern standards. Trying to work out even what those things are doing at times is problematic as well. But I think it's a good start. But I think, again, the execution is going to be where it gets tricky.
Do you think that part of the execution should be to first understand which digital assets need the most protection and sort of focus on those versus trying to protect everywhere? I mean, because as you said, some of these entities are huge or have very, a lot of different systems, some of which are very old.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that applies to any organization anywhere, right? So if you are going to try and secure the environment, what are the crown jewels in that environment, right? So just like 600 years ago, I'd build a castle and I'd have my keep, and the keep would be like the securest part. That's what we need to do here, right? Where are the crown jewels in my organization? Let's secure those first. Let's make sure there's visibility in what's going on there. Let's make sure we patch them properly. Let's make sure they've got up-to-date endpoint penetration testing going on. And then let's fan out from there in concentric circles so that over time we secure the environment, but we realize that parts of it are never going to be as secure as those crown jewels. But working out the crown jewels is always problematic as well, right? Because is the system the crown jewel or is the data? Well, the data probably is, right? So if I have a PeopleSoft system that has my HR data for the IRS, if someone has taken that data and put it on a spreadsheet that's on their desktop is also now in that crown jewels environment, right? So how do I find that? So it's really about, let's work out what those crown jewels are. Let's work out where the data goes. Let's draw a circle around that, and that's what we defend first.
So it sounds like, sort of listening to you, that simply, mandating and applying a zero trust model is not enough. You might, in that scenario you just mentioned, you'd need some kind of automatic discovery of data that's not where it's supposed to be. Or, I mean, this is something we hear about a lot, that when these people scan their networks, they're like, wait a minute, why is this data set sitting over there on somebody's, iPad or something? Like, it just, things pop up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's easy to mandate what we should do. It's much harder in execution, and data does tend to drift, right? So we deal with clients who, the CFO took home a spreadsheet with all the financial statements on just because they had to do some work, or someone took a whole bunch of PHI and put it on a USB drive because they had to go somewhere. I mean, there's always data moving around. So how you track that, how you know where it's going. People will introduce things like data classification schemes. They'll use DLP and DRM and stuff like that. But as we know, human nature is going to be, well, if this thing is causing me a problem and I need to get my work done, I'm going to circumvent that, right? So you've got to account for that as well. So I think that there needs to be this, we're going to implement this zero trust system, but we're also going to educate users in the whole sort of data protection, data hygiene, all those concepts, so they're not making it drift out of our secure circle.
So how does this relate to what you do at OccamSec? Do you work on projects like this in your business?
Yes, so a lot of what we do is we're on the assessment side, so we'd be in what sort of gets clumped into the proactive phase of things. So we try to detect the vulnerabilities, the issues that the bad guys are going to use to get this data to begin with, and that will often focus on where are those crown jewels and can we get to them. So if I'm going to do, if I'm going to do a penetration test, for instance, my penetration test has the objective of, can I get to that crown jewel? So I'll assume the role of an attacker from the outside, breach the environment, get inside the environment, get to those crown jewels and see if I can steal them, and then work with the client to say, what do you have in place right now? Okay, let's figure out how we can use that to secure this so that no one can do what we just did. So a lot of what we do is in that space. And just trying to work with clients to sort of make better use of what they have, right? I mean, so much money is spent on cybersecurity solutions. There are new tools coming out weekly, it seems. And just CISOs and CROs and ISOs and everyone's trying to keep up with this stuff all the time. And budgets aren't infinite, right? I mean, especially in government agencies as well, right? I mean, some do have large budgets, but a lot of them are trying to work with small financial resources. So how can we make the most use of what you've got to defend you? And then we'll figure out where those gaps are and what can fill those gaps.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like in the government context, to go back to something you mentioned a minute ago, if you have like a DOS system or something that's very old, it seems like the getting the money to replace it would be harder than in a corporate setting. I mean, not that it's easy in the corporate world, but in the government, if something's working, to get the money to replace it would probably be more challenging.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, especially in those underfunded agencies, right? Because if it works, why am I going to replace it, right? I mean, it's really hard to sort of reason it out. And in the corporate world, it becomes a case of, well, we'll replace it because if we get the new one, it will save us money somewhere or it will help us make money somewhere. But in a not-for-profit organization like an agency, you can't really make that case. I mean, you can try to say it will save us money in the long run, but it's sort of case, well, how are you going to define that? Like, what's the long run look like? So I think you do have to go with, we've got this system, it works, this is what we need to secure, right? We can talk about how good it would be to replace it, and we can, discuss what we could do, but we're wasting time. So let's figure out, how do we secure this MS-DOS 6.2 system, right? And we can do that. It just requires you to sort of step back and sort of look at your environment, see what you've got, and see how you can move things around to really secure that system, which you can do. I mean, we've done that. I mean, I've seen all kinds of archaic systems from years ago that you can increase monitoring around the environments. You can do network segmentation. There's a bunch of different things you can do. And a lot of them are really sort of like old school, low cost things, right? I mean, you don't need to have the latest and greatest thing. Playing around with your router, changing the ACLs, playing around with a firewall. Those things can segregate environments, and that can get you a long way to where you need to go.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've had some discussions about this in other settings about where, like in the government, where you have a lot of really old legacy stuff, sometimes it can't be patched, even if you want to. Like it's not supported, or the patch will break something. So you can if the solution is to isolate it, right? If you can isolate it, you've gone a long way to protecting it. So that's an interesting point. And again, and this is sort of like, you don't need a law passed to tell you to do that.
Right.
You know, I mean, you can still figure that out. And I guess it sounds like, if I can sort of reflect back, it's like you feel like some of these policies or laws or executive orders are a good move, but they're not essential, and execution is critical. So it's like they don't stand alone, you know.
Yeah, I think that's always the problem, right? I mean, again, it's okay to say you should do X, but if it's just impossible to do, it's like, okay, I mean, that sounds good, and you may hold me to that standard, but all you're going to keep doing is failing me or not reaching that standard, right? So I think we have to sort of, let's try and achieve X, but let's keep in mind the context of where we are, what our organizations look like. Let's realize that some of them may be able to get to that standard and some may not, and that may be okay, right? And again, we're never going to get to this point where everyone is the same. We're not going to have every government agency using zero trust and being locked down exactly the same way and having two-factor authentication, all this good stuff. Some of them are going to be outliers because that just works for them, right? So we have to figure out a way, how do we secure them given the context of their environment? And the contextual stuff applies private sector, public sector, everywhere, right? Like, the best way to approach securing your environment is, what's the best thing for me to do within the context of how we operate, right? How my agency works, how my company makes money, how we help people, whatever it is you do, that's the context you need to work out how to approach your security.
That's great. All right, well, wonderful, Mark. Thank you for being with us today. It was great, and hopefully this won't be the last time we talk.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to chat. Thank you.